economists haven't really been particularly good at explaining what this means in practice. The next 10 years will be defined by this story.
Want to understand China, climate change, war and capitalism? Well, Ed Conway says, start with a banana. And this is why. Hi everyone, Neil here, and if you are a regular on This Is Why, you might just have noticed a few promotions doing the rounds with a certain familiar face.
I'm Ed Conway, and in my new podcast, Stuff Matters, we take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. A pair of earbuds. These are at the heart of a geopolitical battle. The humble banana. This is an economic marvel.
That is, of course, my old chum Ed Conway, our economics editor, author of Material Worlds, and now host of Sky's latest podcast, Stuff Matters. The premise is beautifully simple. Ed thinks that the biggest stories in the world are hiding in plain sight and can often fit into the palm of your hand. Everyday objects, he says, aren't ordinary at all. They are windows into the forces which shape our modern world. All 6 episodes of Stuff Matters are out now, wherever you get your podcasts and all that. So we thought we'd take the opportunity to invite Ed back onto the podcast and get him to explain why we've all been thinking about the world the wrong way round. Ed, lovely to see you as always. And on this occasion, a topic very close to your heart. Everyone's got a podcast these days. Yours is Stuff Matters. Just explain exactly what lies behind it.
I saw the podcast market. It looked very saturated, and I thought, what we need is one more. This is a project that we've been working on for some time, and we wanted to do something a bit different to most podcasts, because a lot of podcasts are kind of conversational things. Mm-hmm. We wanted to do something a bit different, and we wanted to tell a story. We are telling a story that is taking the notions that you might have about the world that surrounds us, the economy, but just the broader politics and everything else, and trying to turn it upside down. And I think it's one of the best things that I've been involved in since being at Sky.
As a jumping off point, I mean, the title itself, Stuff Matters, stuff, things. Yeah. Even in the title is this kind of slightly dismissive attitude that we all have to these seemingly ubiquitous items that we all possess.
Yeah, and I mean, it's this strange thing. Okay, so I guess if there's a conceit, it is that right now the world has so many enormous challenges at the moment. Look at what's happening in Iran at the moment. Look at what's happening in the Middle East. Think about the UK and all of our kind of problems right now. We've got just weak economic growth. We've got some of the highest energy prices in the world. Many of these kind of seem intractable. Most of the time when we try and think about those big issues, like I say, some of the biggest issues facing us right now, the temptation is to kind of go big and to try and do the macro story. But what we're trying to do here, and what I think is actually a really instructive way of looking at the world, is not looking just from the top, but looking at the bottom and looking about the most everyday objects around you and asking the question, okay, what did it take to make that object, or to get it to me, or to enable it to be kind of incredibly cheap? And often when you do that, and whether it's just looking at the story of, I don't know, a banana or AirPods, the AirPods or earbuds you might be listening to this on, when it comes to those stories, actually, the deeper you delve into the rabbit holes of those particular things, then the bigger kind of serious macro world-changing issues become actually a lot clearer. And that's what we're doing. So it's called Stuff Matters, and each different episode takes an object and then kind of tells the story both of the object. But for me, what's interesting is when you look at the story of, let's say, AirPods, then suddenly you kind of see that there's this other story going on. An AirPod wouldn't work without neodymium.
The metal you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the rare earth metal. And basically, the speakers in whatever you're listening to this on, whether it's speakers at your home or whether it's kind of earbuds, those speakers couldn't function without this incredibly rare metal. And where does that rare metal come from? Well, 90% or so of the world's supply comes from China. And so we often think that physical objects around us have just kind of come out of nowhere. But it's long been my kind of feeling that actually, no, go into that rabbit hole and you find this incredibly fascinating, unsettling, interesting story, and that's what we've done in this whole new podcast.
Well, let's start with that particular episode. I mean, AirPods. Plenty of us have got them. That little kind of snapping shut of the lid. What, when you kind of open Pandora's box, do you discover about geopolitics? What are the consequences of that?
Well, I think again, there's a profound lesson that comes from this, which is we like cheap stuff. We don't like to pay more for anything, whether it's kind of trainers or bananas or a pair of AirPods. But in order to make these things, you have quite a number of extraordinary processes, metallurgical processes, refining processes that need to happen. I mean, just take the rare earths. So basically, rare earths is this kind of suite of 17 elements at the bottom of the periodic table. They're not particularly rare. Okay, so if you go into your garden and pull out a lump of earth, there will be some rare earths in there, but just in tiny trace quantities. The rare thing, the difficult thing, is refining them, is separating one element from another. It's incredibly hard. And actually, the story of this, it goes all the way back to the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, Oppenheimer and all of that. When they were trying to develop the atomic bomb in the US back then, one of the challenges they were initially faced with is, okay, how do you actually kind of get uranium separate from all of the other elements around it, which is quite hard. And along in that process, they discovered how to refine rare earth. But the reason I say it's all about kind of, we like cheap stuff is that it's really hard to do. And it just so happens that China is doing it more efficiently than everyone else. And for all that Donald Trump and people over here in the UK keep saying, well, we need to have domestic production of these things. If we have domestic production of these things, everything technological will get more expensive. And are we ready for that? And I don't know that we are necessarily.
You just mentioned the Manhattan Project there. An example, I would posit, of the natural curiosity that human beings possess. But kind of my take on this entire series and the need for this series is that we don't seem particularly curious about where our things come from and why they work in the way in which they do, until, of course, for example, there is a problem in the supply chain and I can't get bananas anymore.
Yeah. The difficulty that we have, you and I have, is that there's a mode of telling a story and a mode of communicating which is about the daily news. And that's still, kind of 75, 90% of my job is okay, this thing's just happened. Andy Burnham's done that, whatever it might be. The Bank of England's done this. What does it mean for me? And of course, that's the kind of thing that news organisations like ours have focused on for a long time. But it's only when you take a step back from that and think to yourself, okay, well, you're asking those questions that toddlers ask, Why is that? I mean, this is why. You're asking, why is the world like that? Why is it that a banana costs 17p and an apple is so much more expensive? Those are questions we don't have much time for in the daily cycle of news. And I think that in so doing, we've had done people a bit of a disservice. I mean, it's just the nature of the way that broadcasting works. But the great thing about podcasts, and the great thing kind of also about new media, is we now have all of these places where we can tell deeper stories. And I think what I've learned from recent years is people do have an appetite to understand more about the world around them.
100%.
But you need, I think, to be able to tell a story in enough of a captivating way to allow people to kind of get with it. So and not to be kind of patronised. And hopefully, again, that's what we're doing with this. And stories, I don't want to get into something too profound here, but the human capacity to tell stories is something that is inherently human. And AI can get some of the way there. But taking that story and taking you on an unexpected journey and showing you how over time things layer and how history echoes, that's something that both, is quite uniquely, human for the time being at least. And also, we can do it and we do have places to do it. And that's what we're trying to do on the podcast.
Well, we all like a bit of a handhold when going through complicated topics like this. When you came to come up with the idea for this series, did you know the objects that you were going to be picking out?
No, we didn't. No, we kind of knew that here was an interesting way of trying to kind of investigate the world and just tell stories. But I think that the key thing here was not just the object. It's what is the totally unexpected lesson that you're going to learn about the world from this object? So Trainers, the final episode, which I think is probably the best because it encapsulates so much of what has come before. Trainers what on earth can you learn about the world from trainers? Well, to me, trainers, and in particular the particular trainer that we talk about, this obscure trainer from the 1970s, that tells you the story of how the world economy works. Because Nike, this amazing brand, happens to be the company which pioneered, at least when it came to trainers, making trainers in a different country other than the one that they're designed in. And when you think about everything, Brexit, Trump, the kind of backlash against politics, a lot of that comes down to the fact that we have allowed a lot of our industrial capacity to go off overseas because people like cheap stuff. And if you kind of take each of these episodes in turn, then almost all of them add up to, I think, this coherent story about trying to see those deeper messages about how we've arranged the world in a different way. And the reason that it's helpful to do it in this way is that the rise of China, the deindustrialization of the West, I think these are some of the biggest economic issues facing us right now. But economists haven't really been particularly good at explaining what this means in practice. And I think the next 10 years will be defined by this story, because it's not just about, whether we have factories here. It's about whether we are able to manufacture the weapons that we might well need to defend ourselves. It's about, energy. It's about everything else. And so we cover that off in most of these episodes. But we're doing it. The critical thing is we're trying to do it in a way that doesn't seem too highfalutin, by looking at specific objects rather than looking at, and it's not just looking at an object and saying, oh, this is funky, this is interesting. It's looking at an object and saying, your perspective on the world is gonna change when you kind of think more about what's going on in this object here.
Do you think people get it, though? The focus on the individual item by us all as an end consumer, that actually the geopolitical power doesn't all lie with the person who invented that thing. It lies with the people who have the ability to stop you from making that thing.
Yeah, I think that's a really profound question, and I think that our kind of conventional wisdom about the way that we run the world is shifting. And I think kind of since the fall of the Berlin Wall, there was this presumption that it didn't particularly matter where something was made. All that matters is, if you pay the money, will it turn up? And who's making it and where is kind of irrelevant.
That's one of your kind of highfalutin topics there, globalization, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've become, in the last few years, I have become very interested in this topic because I mean, it's not a new topic, but I think that this is a very live moment for understanding where things are made, because the world is in a different place to how it was, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. It is more dangerous right now. We've got war in Europe. We have war in the Middle East. You've had a pandemic recently that's raised big questions about where things are made. You have an energy transition which is raising enormous questions about the industrial base and is creating this race for different critical materials. So all of this stuff is happening at the same time, and the net result of it all is to say that the way that we have assumed the world economy should work in the last, kind of 10, 20 years, and it's worth saying the UK has been the vanguard of this, is possibly not right, and we need to reconsider it. And that is only going to redouble. I mean, think about, the car industry. It is the foundation for all manufacturing in this country. Pretty much anyone who's bashing metal in Britain, there aren't all that many as these days, but pretty much anyone who's bashing metal is one of their customers will be the car industry. Right now, that industry is facing the biggest challenge of ever from the rise of China. And it is a, I'd say a live question as to how many car factories are going to be left in Europe in 10 years' time. I mean, it is that serious. And we are going to therefore be wrestling with this question for a long time. And Andy Burnham says he wants to kind of reindustrialize. Well, that's the start of that conversation. But how do you do it? And the answer to that question is it takes time and it costs money and things will get more expensive. And that is an enormous economic shift. And the reason all of this stuff matters, this stuff is going to get really kind of live and political in the next few years. And part of the reason I'm focusing on this and focusing on it from hopefully a different way is to say, let's all try and get more acquainted with some of these issues, because it will stand us in good stead when this becomes front page news, because it's going to be front page news for the next, for years and years.
At the end of the 6 episodes, at the conclusion of this series, did you find yourself being more optimistic about human ingenuity, or kind of more alarmed by human appetite?
No, I'm completely, absolutely optimistic. And actually, the more you look at the things we are able to achieve as a species, I think it's impossible not to be optimistic. 30, 40, 50 years ago, people were worried we were going to, run out of food. But we haven't, because we've become so much more ingenious at eking out more food and growing more food. Yes, there are problems along the way. Yes, there's issues with carbon emissions, but we are able to sustain many more people on this planet than we ever thought was possible. Look at our ability to refine rare earths, to turn them into an everyday item, so that in your pocket, listening to this right now, you are only able to listen to this thanks to extraordinary achievements in physics and chemistry that were never possible before. You're only able to listen to this thanks to, the transistors in the chip in your smartphone or in your, whatever you're listening to this on, that are smaller than the wavelength of visible light, making them invisible. And humans manage to manufacture these things, to mass produce them on a daily basis. And so our ingeniousness knows no bounds. If you're feeling a bit depressed about the world, a bit worried about it, the best corrective is to just look down at the objects around you and ask the question of, how amazing is it that we have been able to, as a species, to take kind of physical things out of the ground and turn them into products that often, help to improve our living standards at such a low cost. That is truly amazing. And our standard of living right now, 100 years ago, we would be working in the fields. Our life expectancy would be basically half of what we have now. Life would be tough. There wouldn't be light in our lives. Most of human existence, we just did not have light. You couldn't see anywhere. And we have all those things. And I think that's marvelous. And I think that's the story that often we miss in the kind of day-to-day, news, that the world has become better and better. And yes, there are problems. Yes, there are challenges. But broadly speaking, the world has become better as we've become more ingenious at putting things together and making stuff.
And that's your lot for today. Many thanks to Ed. A reminder, of course, to go off and search out all 6 episodes of Stuff Matters. Comes with a big Neil thumbs up for that one. And let us know what you thought as well. why@sky.uk is the email address for all your feedback and indeed your suggestions for future topics. We're back again soon.